All right, I have here this Ruger American in 270 Winchester that we're going to check out and shoot and review today. We got a Bushnell Banner 3 to 9x40 scope on here, and you may have noticed the stock. This is Navy Digital, which is now a discontinued pattern, so I'm pretty happy to have that there. So it's a completely factory stock rifle, just has this added sling and obviously the scope, and it is this skinny contour barrel here. So we're just going to put her through the paces and see how she shoots. I've also never shot a Ruger American that I can recall. I've shot Savage and Mossberg Patriot and whatnot, but I've never actually shot a Ruger American. So I'm kind of looking forward to this. Now, I don't believe this scope is zeroed, so I'm going to take a shot or two down there at 20 yards, see if it's at least on paper, and I can make some adjustments from there and start working on getting this thing, for now, 100 yard zero. All right, not too bad, a little high left there, so the height doesn't really matter because we're at 20 yards. It's going to change further out. Obviously, this is way too close, but it is off to the left, so I will have to adjust that slightly. All right, I moved it out to 50 yards there, and I gave it some clicks over to the right. So right now I'm just trying to see if I can line it up. All right, so it did move slightly to the right, but we still got to keep going there, and she's definitely shooting high, so I got to bring it down a lot. All right, gave her a bunch of clicks down and a couple more over. So now I got the target out there at 100 yards, and we'll see how close we are now and do a little group. Hey, that's awesome. Where are we at here? All right, well, I was gonna say, you know, out here, I usually don't shoot quite as good as I do at the other range, just because this bench is a little wobbly and kind of small. And even out at the other range, this bag for me here, it is pretty dang steady, steady enough to where with a good enough rifle I can get headshots at 500 yards, but it's still not 100% perfect. So generally, and this is true, but sorry, I'm a little speechless. I'm just kind of shocked right now. It's amazing down there. So anyways, I'm not as steady here as I could be, and I'm a little better at the other range, but even at the other range with that bag, again, it's a great bag, but it's still not quite 100% steady like this lead sled in the grass here is, where it takes all human equation out of it. So that's not a perfect rest, and this is not a perfect bench, but jeez, we did great down there. I can't wait to go see these. What I'm trying to get at there, rambling on, is that I could do better, you know, with a lead sled and whatnot, but this thing still printed amazing, even though I'm not quite perfect from that bag. There is some movement on my part. I was trying so hard too, because I was like, man, don't mess up that third shot to where they're not still touching. And I can't remember which one was first, second, third. I know the third one definitely went here, but which one of these were first, second, I don't know. This isn't a completely cool barrel either. I mean, it's not that hot. I did have those two previous shots with a few minutes in between, but it's not a cold bore. So as you can see there, 3 rounds touching at 100 yards. And like I said, I could do better if you you put it on a lead sled or whatever. You could still improve that, because I still have some movement. As I always say in my 100-yard group videos, in my long range shooting videos, I always say, yeah, the gun can do better than this, because I always see some movement through my scope. And even with that, got 3 rounds touching here. That thing is sub MOA at 100 yards for a budget rifle. So it occurred to me that I didn't even show you guys what I was shooting. You'll be blown away by this too. Remington core locked, 130 grain. About as cheap as they get, guys. It's far as American stuff goes. So these are just the 130 grain soft points there. So not even match grade stuff or nothing. And that's what we just did at 100 yards with these. Absolutely blown away. So edge to edge there, you're looking at just over 3/4 of an inch. And remember, don't count that yellow stuff. You're counting the hole only. Okay? So like just a hair over 3/4 of an inch. If you go center to center, let's see, what's that coming in? Well, just a little bit over a 1/2 inch. Or right about 1/2 inch. Yeah, center to center. That is amazing. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me if it was a $2,000 rig with match grade ammo, but this is just your standard stuff. And most of you guys know about the Ruger Americans. They run about 350 bucks. I will say, I have noticed, I've watched, you know, a lot of reviews on the budget rifles. I've owned a few, like the Savage Axis, the Mossberg Patriot, like I mentioned, these Ruger Americans, and there's a couple others. They seem to be hit or miss. Some of them will shoot 2-3 inch groups at 100 yards, and some of them will shoot sub MOA like that. So it seems to depend on the caliber as well too. Like some of them shoot other calibers better than some others. Like I think 270 is generally one of the more accurate ones, whereas 30-06 generally tends to be one of the larger groups as far as the budget rifles are concerned. But even with that, for this thing to shoot that well, it's a factory freak, man. You get that sometimes. So you might go out and buy one of these and it might be shooting twice that size of groups, or you might get lucky and get one of these factory freaks like this that shoot phenomenally. And like I said, that's off of this bag, and I got some movement there and just these Remington core locks. So fortunately I did get an awesome example of one. This is my rifle and not on loan, so that's amazing. I was planning on potentially turning around and selling it and getting something else new for the channel, but I don't know. I might have to hang on to this one now. But as far as getting back on track to the review part of the video, overall thoughts of the rifle, aside from the accuracy, which I'm obviously blown away by that, I noticed the bolt isn't super smooth, but you know, what do you expect for $350? You know, this is their budget entry-level rifle for a reason, so it's plenty functional. It's just not as smooth as some higher end you know, actions. That's to be expected. I did notice it's got this little plastic cap thing here on the end. I don't really care for that, but it doesn't really affect anything. It just, you know, kind of gives a cheap feel to it. I noticed when you feed, you get up and it won't want to close down. You got to give it a pretty good shove to set that cartridge all the way, and then you can close your bolt. Noticed that with other rifles, but this one definitely takes more effort to get it to close than the other budget rifles in this class that I've shot. Obviously, aside from this collar combo here, this is just your pretty basic synthetic stock. However, it does feel pretty comfortable in my hand. I like these little grip textures here, give you a little extra bite there, and they got it up here too. Some people might not like how small and thin that is, but I don't mind it, but I have smaller hands, okay? But I also, me personally, I like this indentation here to kind of sink my fingers into. And I noticed something I didn't notice with the other budget rifles, like my Mossberg Patriot, for example. You can actually see the tooling marks, see those little lines in the barrel, so they don't go out of their way to finish this nice and smooth or anything like that. But for me, that's not a problem. It's just I noticed that when I touch it, you can feel the texture from it, and you can see the tooling marks. And the receiver's kind of the same way. But I mean, that's part of how they offer these entry-level rifles for under $400 is, you know, they don't worry about all the spick and span things of giving it a perfectly finished, super nice barrel and action, all that. So, you know, they cut corners to offer the customer a more affordable rifle. Now the trigger. So it's got this kind of copycat looking Accu trigger on it like the Savages have. But I noticed with the Savage and my Mossberg Patriot, those have a, what I would consider to be a better, more crisp trigger. So this has about the same weight to break, maybe a little more. I can't recall if this one you can tune it or not. I'll throw it up in the video if you can. But it's a little heavier than my Mossberg Patriot. but it does have some creep. I'll try to, let me get this cartridge out of here and I'll try to show that. Alright, so there's your little trigger safety thing you got to depress. Let's see if we can capture this. You get that little bit of creep before the break. So hopefully you could have seen that movement there. There was just a hair more, and then finally the break. Depending on your finger placement and finger size and how exactly you do this, sometimes I notice I only get creep just the once, but if I pull real slow and real light, usually I'll feel it twice. So there was a little bit right there. There was a little more, and so after this I'll finally get the break. So it's not bad by any means. It's a pretty decent trigger, honestly. But compared to like the Savage Accu trigger and even the copycat trigger on the Mossberg Patriot, where those have usually no creep whatsoever for me, I am getting creep out of this, and sometimes it creeps twice before it finally breaks. So that can be good in a sense. You know, for accurate shooting, you're supposed to be, you know, surprised by the trigger when it goes off instead of knowing when it's going to go off, because if you have a problem with flinching and you know exactly when it's going to go off, you're going to flinch if you have that problem. Whereas if you have a trigger with some play and you got to keep squeezing through it, you never really know when it's going to get off, at least until you get very accustomed to shooting the rifle. And that's actually what occurred to me there with all three of those shots. So that might have helped some with the accuracy then. I never did know when it was going to go off. I'd get creep. I'm like, all right, let me get back centered again, get the creep. All right, let me get back centered. Well, it's probably going to go off now. And then I just keep squeezing a little harder and a little harder, a little, bang, it goes off without me knowing when it's going to occur. Personally, I don't like that. I like light, crisp breaking triggers with no creep whatsoever. And I do shoot well with those. So I don't prefer this trigger. This would be my least favorite out of the Savage Axis and the Mossberg Patriot, because they have a more crisp trigger like I like. But it's still a decent trigger, and depending on the shooter, that might actually help them shoot better. It just depends. So that pretty much sums it up. I'll live with that trigger for that accuracy any day, but I do prefer the triggers on the Savage and the Mossberg Patriot over this one. So that's my only real complaint. Like I said, the bolt's not the smoothest. It does take a little extra force that my Patriot and the Savage doesn't to set that cartridge, at least in 270 Winchester. It does make a little more scraping, kind of scratching noises than the other ones. But, you know, it still functions just fine. I haven't had an issue with it feeding or anything, so it's just cosmetic. But I do prefer the bolts on the other two mentioned over the Ruger American here. So I think I'm going to hit a steel target down here. It's about 125 yards to the back. I'll zoom you guys in on that. There's a half-scale silhouette out there with this one last round I got left in here. Then we're going to take it out to the other rifle range and do some real long-range shooting with it. Alright, so we're out at the other rifle range now. I got my 20-inch steel gong set up out there, 500 yards. It's on that further mound to the right there, about dead center of your screen, white round circle there. Okay, so according to the results on the target, I went ahead and gave it the adjustment for a 200 yard zero. Now, of course, that's going to depend on how precise this scope is with the adjustments, if it's exactly quarter MOA per click at 100 yards like it's supposed to be. So I went ahead and gave it 200 yard zero according to that, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it 35 clicks up to hopefully have it zeroed at 500 yards. But every gun is different, depends on the rifling, you know, the atmosphere, pressure, humidity, temperature, crap like that, and of course barrel length. So it should be pretty close though. So I'm going to go ahead and try to give it 35 clicks up, which roughly 43 inches at 500 yards, since I have what should be a 200 yard zero on here right now, and we'll see what happens. So in conclusion, I do really like the rifle, especially at the price point. But like I said, I've shot the Savages and the Mossberg Patriot at the same price point. I think I still prefer probably the Patriot myself. I mean, that might be a little biased because I own one, but I've shot them all. And like I said, I'm a big trigger snob, so I definitely prefer the better trigger on the Patriot. But this, I mean, if you know what you're doing, it doesn't really cause any issues. It's just, that's my preference. So, but yeah, I'm blown away by this thing as far as the accuracy goes. And like I stated earlier, I believe that's kind of probably a one-off thing for this. Sometimes you get lucky with them, sometimes you don't. So sometimes you'll get one that shoots sub MOA, and then sometimes you get one that shoots 2 MOA. So thankfully I got lucky and got one of the good ones. So I have no hate towards anyone who prefers the Ruger Americans over the Savages or the Mossbergs or anything like that. In a perfect world, I would own all three. So great shooting rifle for the price, and no real complaints. Like I said, the little things like the little plastic and the bolt not being so smooth, and you know, the tooling marks and whatever, none of that really matters, because that's why you're only paying $300 for the rifle. Thanks for watching, guys. Sorry it was a little long and rambly. Aside from that, if you want to get yourself one of those gongs, the shooting bag here, target stand, targets, links in the description. But again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.